Hello, folks, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about feudalism, the economic system that defined medieval Europe. And I put serfs up, dude, because it's a joke, because in feudalism, the people who work the fields are called serfs. And yeah, it's a history joke. I think it's funny. Anyway, before we get going, I'd just like to remind you that you could subscribe and like the videos to help my channel grow. I would greatly appreciate it. Let's go. What is feudalism? Well, it's the combination of illegal, economic, military, cultural, and political customs that ruled mostly European nations from the 9th to the 15th century. Society under feudalism was organized around the relationships between different classes of people and the oaths they made to each other in exchange for labor, protection, or military service. Feudal societies were highly hierarchical, with the king and his court on top and the serfs or workers at the bottom. Basically, feudalism was the idea that each person had specific relationships with the people above and below them. And it was basically like an exchange. So one person might say, hey, I'll work in your field if you protect me from these bandits. And that guy will say, great, now I've got a laborer. I just have to make sure that I can protect these people. But that's great because I've already said that I will serve in this guy's military. So I have the weapons that I can use to protect you. It was a system that worked kind of like that. So it was a lot about personal relationships between classes of people. Feudalism structure is hierarchical, which means there are people ranked by class. If you look here on the right and the left, on the right, there are many different ways you can see this, right? In a more basic structure, we've got the king and the clergy on top, followed by the nobles, then the knights, and then the peasants. This is a little bit more of a dynamic version here, with a few more nuances in it, like merchants and tradesmen and craftsmen. But generally, that's how it worked. In most European societies at the time, the vast majority of people were serfs or laborers. Above them were knights who would defend the realm, followed by lords and nobles, and then finally the king and the clergy were on top. And the interactions between these different levels were all based on these relationships that they had created, right? Peasants worked for knights on the knights' land, and the knights defended them. The knights owed allegiance to nobles who would provide them with the land, and the king would provide the nobles with the land to give to the knights as long as they gave their word that they would follow the king. Later in the feudal period, independent merchants, farmers, and craftsmen were given a higher station above just regular serfs and peasants because they were doing stuff on their own. Feudalism emerged as the norm in Europe when the Carolingian Empire faded in the 9th century. Basically, that empire took the place of Rome and controlled many different areas of Western and Central Europe. And so when that empire fell apart, the various kingdoms that rose all rose because they were able to make other people swear loyalty to them. Through military obligation, knights were tied to land that they protected, and the people on that land were then tied to that knight. And oaths of fealty were used to maintain these relationships, and the penalties for breaking these oaths were severe. So if you didn't follow through on your oath that you made to someone higher up than you, it usually meant that you would die, or you would lose all of your, worldly possessions, stuff like that. This here is a map of all the different feudal territories in the 15th century in France. So as you can see, all the different colored pieces are different feudal territories. And that's how the Kingdom of France came about, is basically the king got all these different areas to swear fealty to him, and that's what made France France at that point. Japan also had a feudal society for a large portion of its history, with a slightly different bottom to their hierarchy. The top of the pyramid was still warriors of the land. In this case, they were samurai instead of knights. However, in Japan, merchants were placed on the bottom since they didn't produce anything, so peasants and artisans were above them. Japan's feudal system was in place from 1603 to 1867, when Japan decided to modernize their country and they disassembled their feudal system. There are some pros and cons to feudalism, just like any other system. In the pros, as everybody had a place in society, everyone was protected by feudal lords, kingdoms were organized around those lords, and power was decentralized, so each region could focus on its own needs. The cons, of course, were that there was no social or economic mobility, serfs were essentially slaves to their knights, agreements could be broken, and kings did not have as much authority and relied on others for aid, which weakened the central authority of nations. In summary, feudalism created a pyramid structure for society and the economy. Different groups in society related to each other through their oaths of fealty that were made between individuals, and there was little movement within this system, which created a lot of stability after a very uncertain and kind of rough time period in Europe. Each tier of society had special rights and rules, which made the society a little unfair, but in the end, it did create the stability that at least the people in the top of the system really wanted. Thanks for watching and learning about feudalism with us. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you could like and subscribe, that would really help the channel, and we would appreciate it. We'll see you soon with some more videos. Until then, see you later.